is Hugo. He plans to obtain the greatest essence of Baskerville, which is the textbook of swordsmanship containing the teachings of the first patriarch who was able to subjugate the 7 great disasters. However, he wonders who will give him the book and says it will be Hugo, and Hugo will hand it over by himself. He tells Hugo that he will learn the 6th technique, and Hugo is expectant. He appreciates Hugo for the opportunity and says he will ensure he surpasses his expectations. He knows in his mind that Hugo won't realize the true value of the random book that he will hand over to him. After he meets with Hugo, Vicar goes to the 10,000 Epistle Library. He claims it's his first time coming to that place in person. He checks around all the books from the severing incisors, grinding molars and piercing canines, snaggletooth that embeds twice, wisdom teeth that lay down, and all other books about swordsmanship. They are all books on swordsmanship that he desperately wanted in his former life, and they are all there in his presence. He explains that no matter how much mana an illegitimate child of Baskerville had, they can't learn any swordsmanship that is superior to the 4th technique. In order to ensure that the children who become hounds don't bare their teeth toward their master, the Baskerville family implemented the rule as a defense. He eventually sees the book he is looking for. He can't believe that Hugo would offer him the swordsmanship book on the 6th technique. He claims that if it was before his regression, he could never have dreamt of such an opportunity. He realizes that the reason Hugo could have allowed him is that he thinks there is no way he can memorize the books as an 8-year-old little boy. He takes a stick and he breaks the chains on the book. Before his regression, he had learned the theory behind the 1/4 technique until he got sick of it, and it was to deduce and speculate the theory of the 5th technique. He reads in the book that after drawing the 4th tooth, he needed to have stopped mana flow. He wonders if that is why he couldn't make the 5th tooth. Baskerville swordsmanship depends on the stage of the sword. It's 1 tooth for the 1st technique, 2 for the 2nd, and so on. When they draw teeth, a special trait, a red sword energy, will appear. He says he doesn't care about the 6th technique because the real reason he has asked to visit the 10,000 Epistle Library is totally different. The stage he desires to get to is higher than the 5th stage. He comes out of the inner side of the library, and the servants wonder why he has come out very early. They assume he couldn't find the book he is looking for, so they tell him the swordsmanship books and other books are deep within the library, and if he has forgotten something, they can get it for him. However, he tells them he has finished what he came there for. They wonder if that is possible, and they advise him that he should remain there and at least look around a little. He says that before he leaves, he is also thinking of reading other books so they don't have to worry about him and they can continue all they have to do. He enters the directions that are filled with miscellaneous books. The servants wonder why he is going to a place filled with miscellaneous books, and they say if they are the ones in his situation, they will read about textbooks on swordsmanship that are deep within the library. They wonder if he doesn't know the worth of the books because he is still young. He knows all they are thinking about, but he decides to leave them to their thoughts because they don't know that among the dusty miscellaneous books lies a hidden treasure. He goes there, and he finds the book he is looking for, The Lurking Ambush. He is sure that is the book. It's a book on the basis of the 1st technique that the Baskerville children don't even read due to its ripped pages, so they believed it was a useless miscellaneous book, but he knows the book's true worth. Before his regression, in the hound squad that he was affiliated with, he found a strange relic in the dungeon that was on the border of the La Refet-La-Noire mountain. The relic has a page from a swordsmanship textbook. It was a single ripped page and a page with Baskerville's handwriting on it. They brought the page to Hugo, who found it remarkable, so he went through the whole library trying to find the book that matched the page, and it turned out the page was from the swordsmanship book A Lurking Ambush. It was a book that the Baskervilles' ancestors wrote in the Baskerville 10th technique. Hugo, who at that point had gone crazy looking for the 10th technique, released the hounds and found the remaining 6 pages with the techniques written on them. He eventually found out the remaining pages were hidden in the 7 great families. As a result, he declared war on the other families and sent hounds to those who refused to send the pages. After the sacrifice of so many hounds, all the missing pages were given to Hugo, and the reward for doing all that was Hugo just telling him he had done a good job. He is angry about his previous life and says he had only lived a stupid life because of the pages. Hugo broke through the 7th technique and achieved the 9th technique, and under him was wasted piles of hound corpses and blood. However, he will ensure that doesn't happen in this life. He was the hound that claimed the remaining pages of the book, and he remembers all the contents that were written on those pages, and the reason he couldn't go beyond the 4th technique was that he had no access to the original book. He reads the original text, and he sees that the first step to the 10th technique is similar to the 1st technique. And when they unsheath their swords and draw the first path, and show aggression, that is when the sword exceeds its natural limit. So if the other people read the book, it will seem like the book doesn't make any sense. But the moment they use the missing pages and fill in the blanks, the false and misleading information turns into an amazing masterpiece of a book. He had reached the highest level of graduator aura and the highest level of the 4th technique before he regressed, so before he turns 15, he needs to reclaim the power he had before his regression. He keeps reading the book without checking what time or day it is. He eventually cautions himself to stop later in the day. He wonders if he has focused for a whole day. Because of his level of focus, he was able to memorize the book's content from start to end. He can't feel the presence of the guardian knights, so he tries to practice, but he realizes that he can't draw 10 teeth with his young body. But if he does it now, he will be able to activate the 5th technique that he was unable to reach in his last life. He tries to train. He thinks of his previous body and the power of the sword, and he draws the 1st Baskerville technique, after which he goes to the 2nd technique and also the 3rd. He tries the 4th technique too. Remembering that he could only stop at the 4th technique in his previous life, he admits that his previous life was so pathetic. After all his hard work in that life, he was only able to obtain the highest level of graduator aura, but he wasn't able to learn a suitable sword technique. So the people of the direct bloodline were hostile toward him. There was only one reason he couldn't go past the stage of the 5th technique, and it was because he was born as an illegitimate child. He decides that he will never live that kind of life again. He tries to activate the 5th technique, but he still feels weak. He was able to draw the 5th tooth, so that was enough for him to be glad. He felt like something hot from deep within his heart emerged and shot up to his neck. He is so happy at the fact that he can do the technique, and he is glad that he can cry. He is breaking so many records in the history of the Baskerville family, and it is a great story of how a young hound's canine teeth would bear towards his master, and these teeth are growing already. Now that he has finally succeeded in drawing his 5th tooth, as long as his mana can support it, he can reach the level he was at before he regressed. He feels his mana capacity has definitely increased as well. He feels his mana has reached another level, and his liquid aura, which is the sign of a graduator, seems to have gone from a high-class sword expert to that of a low-class graduator. That was a point that took him about 30 years to reach in his previous life, and he can't believe that he has managed to reach there at 8 years old. In their family, graduators are on a completely different level from sword experts. The solid aura starts to turn into a liquid aura, and the density also increases and allows it to be used more freely. At that point, his swordsmanship had gotten so much better than before he regressed. He knew he wouldn't be stopping at the 5th technique, and he will get to a sword technique that could reach the 10th technique with endless possibilities. He has previously learned the piercing fang, and although it was true that he could get stronger in a shorter period of time, it also had its limitations. On the other hand, the lurking ambush is a perfect sword technique that can smoothly transition between offense and defensive with no growth limitation. If he puts his mind into the technique, he might even be able to challenge a mid-class graduator. He feels if he faced a mid-class graduator, he would have a 100% chance of assassination, and about 50% if he faced them head-on. The only issue he has now is how much of his skill he should reveal to Hugo. He can't show too much of his skill, and it won't be great if he shows too little of his strength too. He needs to give Hugo something to look forward to so he can have enough time at the library to take in everything he needs. He sets fire to the lurking ambush book, hoping that with that, Hugo and the other hounds will have a hard time reaching the 10th technique. Well, that excludes him because he has learned it already. The Guardian Knights smell something in the library and they wonder what it is. They see that he has burnt a book and they ask him what he is doing. He lies to them that he is sorry and he has mistakenly left the magnifying glass around, and it burned the book. He says that if they need to report the burned book, he will let the butler know, but the knights tell him that it isn't something that he needs to apologize for and it's their fault for not looking after him properly. And they are glad that he was in an area with only useless books. Vicar also tells them he doesn't think the book is a worthwhile one. He claims they should be busy with the Morgue clan regarding the ruby mines, and he doesn't think that they have to deal with small problems like the one he is experiencing. They also remember that they had left their post of duty, and reporting the issue will also put them in trouble, so concealing it is a small price for them to pay for their nonchalance. They tell him that as long as he also keeps it a secret, they will follow his lead and keep it a secret. He agrees that they should all keep it a secret between them and tells them they can continue with what they are doing since they are busy. He apologizes to them and returns to the library. After he leaves, they talk with each other and they say that he is such a nice person. They claim he even cares about the workers compared to the other young masters, so he deserves to be respected too. Vicar leaves the library and he meets with the butler and Hugo. Hugo is excited to ask him what he has learned and asks if he is enlightened. He tells him he has learned new things, and Hugo asks him to tell him what he has learned in the library. He lies to Hugo that he had felt something warm and sharp yet soft and viscous. They immediately know that he is talking about his aura. They know that aura is a sign that a person has officially entered the world of the sword. Even geniuses have to train without rest until they reach the age of 15 in order to leave the level of a low-class sword expert. Hugo controls himself from getting too excited. He refuses to believe that it's aura and says Vicar is just 8 years old. Hugo asks Vicar if he can show him what he has felt. He tells Hugo yes and draws out his sword. The students wonder how that will end, and the butler asks Hugo how he intends on testing Vicar's skills. Hugo replies that he is planning on releasing a monster for Vicar to deal with. The butler thinks that's far-fetched, but Hugo says he has made sure he prepared a hungry and feisty monster for Vicar to deal with. They bring out the monster in chains. It's an orc with a risk rating of C, and the other students scream. They claim it is an overkill to send an orc to deal with an 8-year-old boy. They feel Vicar needs to be at least 15 before he can deal with an orc. They assume that if things get difficult, the Guardian Knights will get involved. After the orc settles, Hugo commands his knights to remove the chains, and the fight starts. Vicar is sure he is going to win, so he isn't too scared. He sets out and pulls out his aura, and he hits the orc with his sword. The orc starts bleeding and screaming. He knows that the orc must be surprised that it is bleeding for the first time. He knows the orc's distinctive skill, high-speed regeneration, won't activate too, and a C-class monster won't be able to stop the hemorrhage caused by a B-class hellhound. That's because he has used the second slot in his sword to fight. Even Hugo is shocked. He wonders how Vicar is that strong when he is only 8. The student rumor among each other, wondering if it's possible for him to do all that without collecting mana. He sees that Hugo keeps looking at him and thinking. He assumes that Hugo is still trying to determine what he has learned inside the library, so he decides to show Hugo what he wants to see. He puts his aura in the blade, and everyone is shocked that he can now use the aura blade. Even the orc feels the hit before he attempts to hit. Hugo is shocked. He had earlier assumed even a genius couldn't activate such before he was 15. The butler tells him he is certain that the skill Vicar has just activated is the aura of a low-class sword expert. He congratulates Hugo and says it seems they have just witnessed the birth of a genius. Hugo doesn't think the same. He asks the butler if they are what he thinks, and the butler tells him that among the families of the Empire, he doubts that there will ever be a genius like that again. Hugo doesn't want to hear that, so he tells the butler to stop. Vicar turns and tells the audience that he thinks there is something wrong with the orc. He says that orcs are known for their regeneration, and as they can all see, the blood of the orc isn't stopping. Hugo tells the butler that the only reason Vicar won is that the orc was much weaker, but the butler knows Hugo is happy, and he wonders why Hugo can't just express his happiness. Vicar calls out for Hugo and asks him if they have any monster that is stronger than the orc. The reason he has asked for something stronger is because he already realizes Hugo thinks he is not impressed. He feels it will be better for him to show off his power to a certain degree there. If he is lucky and his progress is acknowledged, he will be separated from Hugo. For example, he could be dispatched to a remote area or admitted to an academy. Hugo says that it looks the orc they have brought in isn't enough to satisfy him. He claims Vicar is right, and he should be getting more real-life experience at his age. He reminds the butler that there is a creature that they had captured during the barbarian raid for experimenting, and the butler admits that they have one of those creatures left. But he says the creature must be sensitive at that point because it has been starving for a while. Irrespective of that, Hugo tells him to bring it in. They bring out the monster, which shocks everyone. Even Vicar can't imagine that they want him to confront a troll. He asks Hugo if he wants him to start the fight right away, and Hugo says yes. They release the monster from the chain, and he goes ahead to fight. He struggles with the monster for a while, and at a point, he steps back. His colleagues say the point he had stepped back was his chance to attack, and they wonder why he didn't attack. However, Hugo comments that stepping back was a great thinking because trolls have excellent regenerative power, so only fatal attacks are worth it. He says that a plan is always needed to hunt a troll, so that is what Vicar is doing. The other inexperienced student mock Vicar for dodging all of the monster's attacks and wonder if he is trying to tire the monster out. Some wonder if that day is the judgment day for an 8-year-old or if the boy is really a genius, as everyone has said. Vicar, on the other hand, feels the monster is too slow, and there is no excitement in the fight at all, but he has to act regardless. He feels if he uses the full strength that he has hidden, he can easily kill the troll, but that will put him in a very tough spot, and he needs to make everything seem plausible. For example, he wants to use the power of the troll against it. He runs further and hits the troll. All the students scream that he succeeded in slaying a troll, but they all know the troll will recover in an instant unless the wound he has inflicted is fatal. They feel killing a troll with Baskerville first technique is too hard, but it's impressive that he has accomplished that much when he is just 8 years old. Vicar also knows that the Baskerville's first technique is not enough to slice through the troll's thick skin, but he knows the troll would die from his sword's hemorrhage skill after a while, but that would be meaningless. Hugo sees that he has done enough. He tells him to stop and says if he goes further, he may be in danger, but Vicar tells him he isn't done, but he is almost done. He tells them that he thinks he is near an epiphany. He claims he will give up on fighting the troll if he doesn't kill it with the next attack. Hugo allows him to show his skills. Vicar really wishes to kill the troll, but he wonders how much of his power he should expose. He decides the answer to that question, and he sets out for his next